Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Rice. I'm the lead pastor at Faith Community CRC in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willie Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And coming out of Synod 2024, things continue to be messy. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation might look like. If you haven't already, take a moment, click subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. We're dropping episodes every single Sunday evening. It's also important for you to know that you are our marketing plan. We rely on you to spread the word about what we're doing at the Messy Reformation. We rely on you to share our content. We also rely on you to give us 5-star reviews and provide good feedback for this podcast so that the algorithms put out our content further into the world. You are our marketing plan, and we believe we've placed our marketing in good hands. You can also support us financially on Patreon or Substack. All of the money raised is used to further the mission and the platform of the Messy Reformation. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode, which is part 1 of our conversation with Steve Zwart. Well, Steve, why don't you just kick us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and the church that you're at.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, guys, for having me today. It's good to be with you, and I'm in the middle of a transition right now, so it's a lot of exciting stuff going on right now. But I grew up on a dairy farm in Northwest Iowa, one of 4 kids on that dairy farm, and as they often say, that the dairy farm kind of owns you when you live on a dairy farm. So we were accustomed to a lot of hard work, a lot of chores. That was my upbringing. But anyway, brought up in a great Christian Reformed church there, Hawarden Christian Reformed Church. Just really appreciated the pastors there. One of which was instrumental in going into for me to go into full-time ministry. He was really just a pivotal figure in speaking into my life and really seeing things I didn't see at the time. I was only 16, and we could talk about that a little bit later. But that's when the call to ministry came for me. But anyway, after high school, went to Dordt University. Met my wife there. We got married while we were at Dordt. We've been married 36 years now, and we've been blessed with 8 children. And so the journey's been quite an adventure. After Dordt University, we both moved to Michigan. I attended Calvin Seminary, and my wife attended Grand Valley State University. She went and got her master's in social work, and of course, I got my MDiv. And at the end of seminary, I was one of the classes that still had a majority that did the straight through track, going college and then straight into seminary. After my class, it switched where the bivocational or second vocation students kind of started being the majority. But anyway, at the end of my seminary years, I did my internship up in First Christian Reformed Church in Calgary, Alberta. I got to enjoy the beautiful Canadian scenery for a year, and thoroughly loved that place. And it was a very transformational place for myself, for ministry. My mentor was amazing, and he's gone to be with the Lord now, but was just incredible in shaping my perspective of church, of community, of kingdom. And so I was just eternally grateful for his ministry in my life. But then after that, Home Missions asked us to come to Maple Grove, Minnesota. And it was there that we picked up the opportunity to jump into a fledgling church plant. The church plant had been going for some time, and the original church planter gathered a group, and he was only there about 9 months, and tragically was killed in a car accident. But the core group still stuck it out and worked hard, and the church began to grow. They got another pastor. But then the church kind of struggled to find itself and kind of connecting to the community, and they went through some changes. But Home Missions really felt that that was a good place yet to try and establish a Reformed presence on the northwest side of the Twin Cities. So they invited us to come in there, and we spent about 2 years there. Great group of people. However, there were just a number of dynamics that factored into really the necessity to close the place. So my first charge was 2 years and then close a church,
Wow.
which doesn't look great on a resume, but nevertheless, that was how ministry began for me. And then it was shortly thereafter we got the opportunity to go to Princeburg, Minnesota, and just God blessed that time, and we were blessed to be there and got to serve there 25 years. It just saw a lot of amazing things happen. There were some many challenging moments as well, but just learned a lot about ministry, learned a lot about doing steady, faithful ministry. And about spring of last year, all of a sudden, kind of out of left field, the Lord said, I'd like you to talk to this other church. And it was a church I was familiar with, but I thought, well, we'll see once. And so as the conversations went on, it was really clear that the Spirit was leading us to take a call, which we weren't quite ready for yet. We had enjoyed our 25 years, and everything was pretty familiar and comfortable and everything. But nevertheless, we felt led to take the call, and now we are here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, serving First Christian Reformed Church, and just super blessed to be here and ministering.
Well, Steve, thanks for all that. You're kind of saying, talking in terms of resume, you always want to point to the long tenures, the healthy, the comfortable. But sometimes, kind of like you're pointing at, God can call a pastor to a church in order to actually give the church the ending that it deserves and that's best for it. And some pastors are actually suited to that. So I think that's something we should keep in mind as well.
It was funny. I did a visit to Calvin Seminary shortly after we had closed the Maple Grove Church. And one of my professors, I won't say who it was, but one of my professors, I was explaining this to, and he's good. He said to me, "Well, good for you. We need a few more John Waynes in the Christian Reformed Church." I didn't know how to quite take that, but okay, I suppose. But anyway.
Yeah, what types of things do you think you learned in those 2 years that helped kind of carry over into your call at Princeburg?
One of the things was, and every church does this. You can't blame them. I mean, every church wants to put their best face forward, and this wonderful little church did exactly that. Upon arriving, however, we did discover there were some dynamics there that were going to prove to be more challenging than we kind of were led to believe. Nevertheless, I give them a lot of credit. Many of them were basically had joined the church as people who were just looking for a church home and not really kind of a mindset to do church planting. And yet, because of the turnover in that worshiping group, some of the original group went back to the church they came from. Suddenly, they had tossed into their lap, oh my, we're now back to kind of church plant status. And they weren't really expecting that. So, again, those were kind of some of the dynamics we discovered after we were there. So I think one of the things is just have good, thoughtful conversations on the front end and do some discerning and yet just come in with a lot of grace. You just got to come in with a lot of grace. I found that in all the calling processes that I've participated in. You may not get the big picture, clear picture, all the details, So you do have to come in with some grace and recognize that, okay, you got to meet people where they're at, and here we go.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I think, because I had a similar experience in my church. I've mentioned I'm in a church revitalization, and I don't even think, I wouldn't even say my church was only trying. I mean, of course, they're going to try to put on a good face because they want a pastor, but they're also, churches often aren't even aware of some of the issues going on in the church, and so they're not even clear that's what are real issues in there. And so it's, I've been thankful. I have days where I'm not so thankful, but I had some older pastors tell me, like, when you go into a church like this, like, you got to sit for a good year, listening to people, paying attention before you try to make any changes, because you got to just see things clearly. And I think, man, I was a year, 2 years, 3 years. I'm 6 years in, and I'm like, I'm still seeing that I didn't see things clearly right away, and our church didn't see things clearly right away. And so part of my role in a revitalization or even a plant like you're talking about is to help them see some of the unhealth in the church, and then try to address it.
And I think too, with that, most settings, and in fact, all the settings, at least I've participated in, all of them had a measure of anticipation, expectation, some momentum. And so you got to try and read that, as well as, how fast, do you want to move things, and how much do you have to help pull the reins, saying, okay, we'll get there. We just need to have a few conversations between now and where you want to be in order to make sure we get there in a healthy way. And I think that's, all of us, when we step into something new, there's an element of excitement about it, or anticipation about it. And I think we have to keep ourselves in check to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. Wanting to ride the momentum wave, ride the honeymoon wave of entering a new place, and be mindful of just pace, listening, creating buy-in. That was one of the, I appreciated one of the hard lessons, but nevertheless a good lesson when I transitioned from Maple Grove into Princeburg, is there was a lot of conversation about, hey, let's do this and let's do this. And I'm like, okay, let's go. And we launched into this, and then quickly discovered, well, that wasn't exactly what they were expecting. And I don't blame them. I mean, it was some pretty significant changes they were talking about, but when the changes started to happen, there was pretty significant pushback, and understandably so. And then there was a wise saint in the church that said, one of the things about, in particular, that context is, you've got to create the time for buy-in. You've got to bring people along in the story, have them kind of, adapt, or at least entertain the possibility of this change, that change, or whatever, and bring them along.
Steve, you're kind of talking about something that I want to ask about, and that's, kind of priming things and tempering yourself so that you can accomplish certain ends. So you went from 2 years to 25 years of service in your next charge. So I'm kind of wondering, that's quite the tenure, especially these days. So I'm kind of wondering, when did you know that you were in Princeburg for the long haul? What were some of the indicators that, that gave you the inclination to know that you're in this for quite a while?
I would say there were a couple things that played into this. Early on, I really wondered if I was going to be there that long, because the pushback was pretty significant, to the point that I was 10 years, roughly in the 8 to 10 year window of being in Princeburg, and we did kind of a timeout. I stepped away for 3 months, and that was kind of a mutual thing. We parted ways for 3 months, and we all had to kind of regroup during that. But against that backdrop, I had gone into that time period early on in my tenure at Princeburg. I attended a conference that Leith Anderson at Wooddale Church in the Twin Cities had conducted. And he had done, he had done annual pastor gatherings, and he said something. I was in a session with him, and he said something that just began to stir in my head, because at that time, a number of my classmates, colleagues, and kind of even a little bit of general feel in the denomination was kind of that 3 to 5 years, go in, do your thing, and then move on. And there was something about that in me that just, I don't know, I just sat back and went, I don't know. I don't know if I like that. Something doesn't seem right about this. So Leith Anderson's doing this seminar, and of course he at that time already had been at Wooddale Church probably 15, 20 years. And he explained this thing, this 5-year cycle. And basically it's the first 2 years are the trust building years. And then 3, 4 are the testing of that trusting. And then he said, the key is get to year 5 in the cycle. So in other words, what he saw in ministry was that you recognize a trust building is happening on the front end of this cycle, and rightly anticipate that's going to get tested. Are we in this together? Do we really believe in whatever it is that we're pursuing? And then as you work through that, you get to year 5, and you're at a new plateau. You're at a new place of initiating that trust relationship. His point in illustrating that was that at that time, the average stay of a pastor in the United States was 2.8 years. And he had learned, and Barna studies and others had confirmed, that a pastor doesn't reach peak effectiveness till year 5. And that's where he started doing some research and discovering this 5-year cycle. What was so special about year 5? It's because you stuck around through the testing of years 3 and 4. Mm-hmm. And if you could figure out how to do 3 and 4, 5 is going to be a pretty special place, potentially, if you do years 3 and 4 right. Well, when the Princeburg Church and myself parted ways, we were at the 8, 9, 10 year of this cycle. So basically 3, 4, 5 of a 5-year cycle. And the testing had reached a point of, real intensity that we needed to part ways for a while. But in that, I kept thinking in my head, okay, Lord, what's coming out of this testing? And there was such a tremendous peace that the Lord gave me in that time, that combined with what Leith Anderson had said was, okay, you need to press through this. Okay, I'll give you peace, but I'm gonna ask you to press through this. And so back to your question, Willie, about when did I know that this was going to go long term? It was years 12 and 13. We got on the other side of this, and we had gone through 2 pretty intensive testing periods, okay, the years 3, 4, and the years 8, 9. And when we got on the other side of year 10, and we got into 11 and 12, it's as if the whole dynamic in the building had changed. And even though it was rough going, the trust went deeper. And that's when that happened. I knew that at that moment, we could do this long term. We could, even though, we may have to go through more testing, we could actually do this long term. And what I found is years 13, 14, 18, 19, and 23, 24, the testing was there, but it was almost a oh, what's the word I'm thinking of? It was actually more positive. It was kind of a
Mhm.
positive testing. Like, hey, we're really enjoying this. Let's keep doing this, and maybe let's try this or let's try this. And so it 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 just it kind of builds some momentum. But it was after two really intensive periods of testing and trust building that I knew that this was going to go had the potential to go long term.
Yeah. And that's really good. I think that just fits with a lot of the stuff I've heard over the years too. Just even in like a church revitalization situation, they often say like, don't expect there to be any change or health until after like 8 to 10 years. And you can kind of see because you had to go through a few of those kind of cycles of building trust, that being tested, moving into something else. That you have to go through that a few times before the congregation is shaped in that way. So that's really good. I've always kind of pushed back against the whole like pastor hitting the road every 5 years or whatever, because we just know like long term, and we've already kind of hit on this, right? Long term change is always the result of a long, slow almost always the result of a long, slow process.
Well, and I think too is just the basic principle, don't bail just because it's getting hard. And I think that's, we sometimes, and I think hypocritically or piously say, well, it's time for me to move on, or the Lord's calling me elsewhere. I push back on that a little bit, going, is it that, or is it just hard right now? And sometimes, as both personally, professionally, but even as a denomination, you got to press through the hard stuff. You gotta have the hard conversations, ask the hard questions, and then you just gotta agree to press through, get to that year 5, and then relook at things.
Mm-hmm.
But don't bail just because there's the smell of roast preacher in the air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, and so we're not going to get into all of the details of this at all because it would be inappropriate, but how you and I first met was in the midst of a pretty messy situation at my church. And Willie was a member of the youth group. He was in the church through all this. So we've kind of had this relationship in messy situations.
Oh, yes.
And during that situation, when I was in it, man, it was a rough season of ministry for me. I was the only staff person left in the church, and it was really brutal. You were very helpful and encouraging for me in that season. But I remember I was in seminary during all of that, and I had all of my seminary friends and my mentor at seminary saying, you need to quit. You need to leave that church. They're not treating you. There was all of that. And I'm like, God has not given me the go yet. I'm not going to leave this call until God has released me from it. And yeah, it's hard. It's really, really hard. But you read the Bible, like just read the overall storyline of the Bible. I don't know if anybody had an easy call. I mean, I think my favorite line of the Bible regards to pastoral ministry is this moment with Moses where he looks at God and he's like, I didn't give birth to these people. These are your people. Why do I have to deal with them all the time? And as a pastor, you're like, yeah, there's days where it's like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah, that trust thing, I think is so huge in terms of just general effective ministry. I mean, there's got to be those layers of trust there, and unless you stick around through the hard stuff, part of the difficulty is if you don't stick around through the hard stuff, you take that with you. Mm-hmm. You've not resolved that in yourself. You're not resolved that in your mind and heart. So you take that tension with you to the next place. And I think that's where I think, and that was to Leith Anderson's point too. He says the reason the church at that time was struggling is because we had ineffective pastors going into churches that had not reached their peak effectiveness. And so you had kind of this codependency of ineffectiveness trying to figure out how to do this. And I think that's what he saw at that time. But again, that's what really stuck in my mind is that you have to push through the hard stuff. You just have to.
No, I think that's well said. Jason was kind of hearkening back to, our time at Bethel, your time in Lake Superior, and you were those were my more formative years. I was pretty young, a 19, 20-year-old kid on search committee.
He's calling us old right now.
I caught that.
Okay,
that's
very
right.
good. I'm glad you caught
ahead.
that. My question actually has to do, you spent quite a bit of time just involved in Lake Superior classical work. And you and I, in my later years, I'm not going to call myself old, but we actually didn't get that much overlap in Lake Superior until the end of your tenure. But I'm wondering about your time spent in Lake Superior, your work that you did in the classes, the connections that you've made, the work you did. Can you kind of speak to any of that?
Sure. Well, on a couple different fronts. One of the things that I always appreciated, and I think to a certain extent some I won't say which side of the board are underappreciated, but I always appreciated the multinational effect. I mean, we were U.S. Canadian classes. I always enjoyed that. And maybe that was just because I had served in Canada and loved my time there. And I thought, how cool, we get to get together twice a year and, have a 2-day gathering and, coming from Ontario and Manitoba and Minnesota and Wisconsin. And I always found that beneficial. I appreciated the intention to, spend 2 days together. There was a nice mix of worship, fellowship, and hard work that was done. So I appreciated that. Obviously, I did several roles over the years. Got to serve as chair and vice chair a number of times. Was stated clerk for 8 years. Served on a visioning team and missions team, and church visitor a number of times. And then on a number of occasions, and this is where the three of us have crossed paths before, but I remember a season in Class Lake Superior where I think we had 5 Article 17s over 2.5 years, and I remember that as that was a tough season for the classes, and there were shining moments, that the church did the work that the church needed to do. And yet there was just a lot of hurt and brokenness. And I can remember even myself going, wow, is this what it's coming to? And, who's next? There was actually a little bit of feeling in the classes during that season, like, this is crazy. Who's the shoe's going to fall where next? Type of thing. So, we've had our great moments. I thoroughly enjoyed Classes Lake Superior. I appreciated just the variety of ministry that we did. As I was concluding my time in Classes Lake Superior, I got to thinking, my wife and I sat down and kind of went through all the churches in Classes Lake Superior, and I realized that every single church in the classes had seen at least 3 to 4 pastor turnover during the 25 years I was in the classes. So then you really feel old all of a sudden.
That's how you become Bishop Steve Zwart.
There's something like that. I think that term was tossed around a few times.
Yeah. One of the things I really appreciated about Lake Superior and the distance, the geography of Lake Superior made it really difficult. But what it always forced us to do was to make classes this overnight thing. Yeah. And I know some people were like, oh, it's 2 days and 1 day is hard enough. But I've tried to get this. I have not been successful in getting other classes to adopt it, but so there was something so great about us being able to show up on Monday afternoon and do some training and do an education segment. And then, we'd hang out and we'd have meals together. There's a ton of fellowship that went on. And it seemed like just because of all of that, once we got to business on Tuesday, like things kind of went pretty smoothly because we had built trust. There was good community and we were able to kind of get some work done. And I've tried to tell people, like, I think we'd almost be more efficient if we did this overnight thing, but it was really good community, the little bit that I was able to be a part of that.
I think absolutely right. I have so many good memories of Monday night worship time, fellowship time, breaking bread over meals. I think there was just a neat bonding that took place, that we could handle hard stuff when we needed to handle hard stuff and have hard conversations. And we found our way through. Some of the stuff we had to deal with was pretty weighty, and yet we found our way through. And I think you're absolutely right that pursuing that relationship beyond just business. If I think classless work would be, as it were, more of a draw, maybe a bit healthier, if there was that bonus time, if you want to call it that, where there's corporate worship together, there's fellowship together, there's non-business time together. That takes intentionality, and certainly geography can play a part in that. But boy, we're able. The more you can build those bonds on the off time, on the non-business time, I think the church is healthier. The local church is healthier when we are intentional about that.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, and I think just in the life that we're in our denomination as a CRC, I think the healthier our classes can be, the healthier our denomination is going to be as well, right? And so I'd love to. I say that I was the chair of our classes renewal team, so I'm a little biased, but I think it's a really important role in this season of the church for our classes to be really healthy and functioning well, and I think that kind of brings itself up into the broader denomination as well. I want to transition just a little bit. This may seem kind of out of left field, but I really do want to have a conversation because it fits with everything we've been talking about. I want to talk about Synod 2023 because you got to, you've as you've mentioned, you keep getting thrown into all these kind of difficult positions. And I guess before I ask my question, just a quick one: how many times have you served at Synod over the years?
I believe I've been there 5 times now.
Okay. All right. So Synod 2023 was your 5th time being at Synod. Okay. So you're kind of a Synod veteran then. You've got some experience there. But what was going through your mind when you found out that you were going to be on, I think it was Committee 7 that year, right? The Human Sexuality Committee.
What other plans I could schedule for that week? Looking to see who the alternate was? No. I'll have to admit, I got a little lump in my throat initially when I opened up that email and discovered that was going to be the committee I was going to be on, and we were going to be tasked with processing 40 some overtures and communications, and knowing that we would have a very diverse committee, and that I tried to anticipate some of the conversations, but really, with Synod work like that, you're probably best trying to not overthink before you get there. I mean, read your materials, get yourself ready, but you really have to just be ready to step into the moment and collectively process with 25 other people in that room. Okay, how are we going to do this? And so I was really grateful for our chair. We ended up agreeing to disagree at the end of the day, but I thought he for all the work we had in front of us, he broke it down into workable chunks so that by the time we got to the floor of Synod, the vast majority of the stuff that came to our committee, we all signed off on, and subsequently Synod did as well.
That's all we have for this week. If you want to help us out and support the Messy Reformation, another thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter through Substack. That way, you'll get episodes and summaries sent directly to your email inbox. It will also give us the opportunity to communicate with our audience, which is one of the biggest struggles of a podcast. So head over to the Messy Reformation on Substack and sign up for our newsletter. But until then, don't forget this is Christ's church, and he bought it with his blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So, keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season. And keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.